She becomes my queen consort.
In a move that shook the British monarchy to its core,
Charles said he hoped his experience may give encouragement to others.
Prince Willaim seized control.
And I felt, you're losing people every single time you have those headlines. We all get that there's a really big urgent message.
And within hours, expelled Queen Camilla's children from the palace. But the Christmas lunch banishment was just the first move in a battle that would expose corruption at the very top of the crown. What secrets did Willaim uncover that demanded such ruthless action? And how far would Camilla go to protect the empire of lies she had built? Join us as we find out what happened after Prince Willaim seized control. Dining room execution. Christmas lunch at Sandringham should have been ordinary. Roasted turkey, pudding, polite conversation. Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes laughed over estate renovations and wine cellars, treating royal access like a birthright. Willaim sat at the head of the table, motionless, eyes following every gesture. King Charles looked tired. Camilla's practiced smile faltered. The air was tense in a way no one spoke of. The main course had just been cleared when Willaim set his water glass down with a sharp, deliberate clink. It was subtle, almost casual, but everyone at the table felt it. Within seconds, the dining room doors swung open. This time, it wasn't waiters or dessert staff. Armed security entered, moving with precision, faces unreadable but their purpose clear. Conversation stopped mid-sentence, knives paused in mid-air. The room went still. Willaim rose slowly and placed a blue folder on the table with a soft thud. Inside were the documents no one could ignore: forensic audit reports, bank statements, shell company registrations, invoices tracing the flow of millions siphoned from royal accounts. Tom and Laura's faces were drained of color. Tom sputtered, calling it an insult, turning to Camilla as if she could rescue them. She sat frozen, gripping her napkin so tightly her knuckles turned white, unable to speak. King Charles, staring down at the pages, went pale. The numbers left no room for doubt. Willaim spoke evenly, almost quietly, but every word hit like a strike. All contracts between the Crown and the front companies were terminated immediately. State auditors would reclaim misappropriated funds. Access to royal properties and finances was revoked. There was no argument, no negotiation. Security officers stepped forward, guiding Tom and Laura from Sandringham. They weren't allowed to use the main exits. Instead, they were led through service corridors, out the rear door meant for staff and deliveries. Their protests went unheard, ignored. Willaim watched from the window, expressionless, fully aware of how severe it looked. But severity was the point. The era of exploiting royal privilege was over, and the message was clear. The rules had changed, and no one would be above them again. The real question was how a Prince of Wales, not yet king, could remove the Queen's children from crown privileges and act against his father's wishes. 2 days before Christmas, Willaim had quietly orchestrated a legal transfer of authority, granting him emergency powers over crown finances and internal oversight. It was precise, legal, and pre-planned, giving him the ability to act unilaterally against misuse of royal resources. It was calculated, executed with military precision. Inside, the family was left stunned. Camilla and Charles struggled to process the events. Staff whispered in the corridors. Outside, Tom and Laura sat in a standard security vehicle, removed from the household like ordinary offenders. Willaim understood the optics. It would look ruthless, even cruel, to some observers, but it was necessary. Any suggestion that public duty could be manipulated for private gain had just been ended decisively. The palace had witnessed a dramatic shift. Authority had been asserted in the most visible, undeniable way. The question everyone was left with, even if unspoken, was how far this redefinition of royal power would go, and whether it marked the start of a new era of accountability. Willaim seizes control,
Prince William will go above and beyond to control the monarchy's image by stripping non-royal or non-working royals of their titles.
48 hours before Tom and Laura's expulsion, a meeting took place that would never appear in any court circular. At St. James's Palace, in a secure conference room free from Camilla's influence, William sat across from the Lord Chief Justice and the Home Secretary. Thick Tudor-era walls blocked any electronic surveillance. The atmosphere was heavy, more like a military tribunal than a royal transition. But what exactly was being decided behind closed doors? The official story later told to the press was that King Charles III, facing health challenges, had temporarily transferred regency powers to William to maintain continuity. Cooperation, family unity, and stability were emphasized. But the truth was far more aggressive. William was taking operational control to remove what he saw as a malignant influence in the monarchy. The Regency Act was being activated, but William's interpretation of his powers went beyond precedent. The documents weren't ceremonial. They were keys to security services, financial oversight, and personnel decisions normally reserved for the monarch. When Charles signed at 9:47 p.m., shaky but deliberate, the transfer became legally binding. By 10:15 p.m., William was already moving. His first call was to summon the Director General of MI5 and the Keeper of the Privy Purse to a midnight meeting at Clarence House. Their jobs hung by a thread. William informed them that their offices had been compromised by influences loyal to the Queen's household. He didn't accuse them personally, but their cooperation was mandatory. The Keeper of the Privy Purse, a 30-year veteran, cited protocol. William's reply was icy, because those protocols allowed millions to be stolen. That could no longer be condoned. By 2 a.m., both positions had new occupants. William had spent months secretly vetting replacements from outside the palace ecosystem, financial forensics experts, and counterintelligence professionals loyal to integrity, not personalities. Then came the crown jewel, access to the black box, a secure digital archive of decades of financial transactions, security reports, personnel files, and classified correspondence. Designed for the monarch and spouse alone, it had allowed a lack of oversight that enabled abuse. But what secrets would it reveal once opened? For months, William's team had collected whispers of irregularities, anonymous tips, and unexplained expenditures. With the black box, the picture became clear. At 3:30 a.m., William ran his first query. All contracts and payments linked to the Parker Bowles family over 5 years. The results confirmed and exceeded his worst suspicions. Royal funds had been quietly diverted through everyday budget lines, logistics, estate maintenance, diplomatic receptions, and charitable events. Taken individually, none of these entries raised alarms. They were all plausible, routine expenditures. But the patterns told a different story. Payments had been systematically rerouted, small sums here and larger transfers there, designed to appear legitimate on surface audits while secretly accumulating vast sums in accounts no one was supposed to see. At the center of this web were Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes. They weren't just benefiting casually. They controlled a network of offshore trusts in the Isle of Man, Jersey, and the British Virgin Islands, each linked to Shell. Companies that held actual palace contracts. Every invoice, every transfer, every signed document was part of a coordinated strategy to extract wealth under the guise of ordinary operations. The sophistication of the scheme made it clear this wasn't opportunistic theft. It was planned, deliberate, and insulated against discovery until William's investigation finally exposed it. Tom's network controlled the palace's premium food supply. Scottish salmon is billed at triple the market rate. Wine at £2,000 instead of £500. Flowers quadrupled in cost. Laura billed tens of thousands for media advice, amounting to a single email, or hundreds of thousands for crisis consultations when no crisis occurred. The most shocking category: special event production and coordination. Cross-referencing invoices with court circulars and photographic evidence revealed that many events never happened. Others were dramatically smaller than billed. Was this just greed or deliberate fraud designed to siphon millions? Invoices showed approximately £45 million taken over 5 years, routed through accounts controlled by Camilla's children. Every fraudulent transaction passed through the Queen's office before reaching the keeper of the privy purse. William now had proof of what was stolen and how. But what remained unclear was whether Camilla was simply negligent or had orchestrated the entire scheme from the shadows. The answer hinged on one final clue: a distinctive purple seal appearing on documents at the precise moment the aging king was most vulnerable. If that seal revealed complicity, the fate of the Queen's children and the balance of power in the monarchy would be decided. Purple seal of betrayal. The forensic accountants in William's secure basement operation were exhausted but relentless. They weren't palace bureaucrats used to deferential treatment or slow lunches. They were investigators pulled from the Serious Fraud Office and former MI6 financial intelligence units, trained to track international money laundering. Working in a windowless, highly secure room at Kensington Palace with no internet, no phones, no outside contact, their instructions were simple: find the smoking gun. But who would have thought they'd uncover a betrayal so intimate? A lead analyst who had previously unraveled a £2 billion Russian money laundering network spotted the pattern that would shake the monarchy. She'd been reviewing special fund expenditures, money set aside for emergencies, bypassing normal oversight. Royal regulations dating back to George V required 2 signatures for any withdrawal: the keeper of the privy purse and the monarch himself. This dual approval existed to prevent unauthorized raids on the Crown's discretionary reserves. There was a compiled special fund authorization over 5 years, 237 transactions totaling £87 million. She ran the signatures through analysis software, comparing them to known exemplars from different periods. A healthy monarch's signature would score 95 to 98% confidence for consistency, letter formation, and control. The results were shocking. The largest authorizations, between £500,000 and £3 million, scored just 45 to 70%. These weren't just sloppy signatures. They were produced by someone whose hand trembled, whose motor control was impaired, someone signing under heavy medication or extreme fatigue. Cross-referencing these signatures with King Charles's medical schedule made it worse. The largest fraudulent transactions coincided precisely with chemotherapy treatments or post-operative recovery periods, times when anti-nausea, drugs, and painkillers would dull cognition. Someone had exploited his medical vulnerability with precision. William sat in cold fury as analysts laid out the timeline, showing signatures next to medical records. It was described as a systematic exploitation of the king's condition. But who had orchestrated it? Then came the sandwiching technique. High-value requests were buried among mundane paperwork, ceremonial proclamations, diplomatic letters, military commissions, and charitable approvals, stacked so the king would barely notice the dangerous documents. Staff loyal to Camilla's office would press urgency. "We really must sign these today, sir. Perhaps quickly, so you can rest?" The king, trusting and fatigued, signed rapidly, giving only seconds to each page. Was someone deliberately weaponizing his trust? The definitive proof came from the purple seal. Special fund requests first passed through the Queen's office for administrative review, which included applying a distinctive seal, Camilla's personal insignia, before sending documents to Charles. On every fraudulent authorization, below Charles' trembling signature sat that purple seal, applied 24 to 48 hours in advance. Someone had deliberately approved the misuse. The implications were brutal. This was not just embezzlement, it was elder abuse. The king's illness had been exploited, his trust weaponized, millions siphoned from the crown, and the person orchestrating it was meant to be his closest ally. William now had digital evidence of a sophisticated scheme. But digital copies weren't enough for criminal proof. He needed the originals, physical documents with both Charles's signatures and Camilla's seal, plus internal correspondence showing conscious approval. The palace archives were vast and labyrinthine. If Camilla realized William was closing in, she could destroy evidence. A fire in a records room, a plumbing disaster, or a misplaced file. William had to act carefully. He devised a trap. He deliberately leaked information about the forensic investigation through channels still loyal to Camilla, letting her believe she was under pressure. He would let her panic, make a desperate move, and then he would catch her. The stage was set, but the answers were still unknown. Who would be sacrificed in the scramble to cover up the theft? Would Camilla destroy the evidence and expose herself, or could she escape unscathed? When loyalty becomes a weapon. The leak was intentional and without fault. William's team had identified Margaret Thornton, an administrative assistant in the Privy Purse office, personally recommended by Camilla and loyal to her. She wasn't corrupt. She genuinely believed Camilla was unfairly vilified. But that made her predictable. William's investigators arranged for her to overhear a staged conversation between auditors. The money trail was traced, the original signed documents were the final piece, and once retrieved, the case would be airtight. Margaret heard every word, just as planned. How long before Camilla realized the trap had been set? Within 6 hours, she did. Margaret's warning reached her through Camilla's remaining network while she was taking tea at Clarence's house. Camilla dismissed her staff and spent the next 2 hours calculating. The digital evidence William had gathered was powerful but arguable. Physical documents bearing Charles's vulnerable signature and her purple seal would be definitive. If those papers survived, her position would collapse. She made her decision coldly. Retrieving a disposable phone she used for sensitive conversations, Camilla called Ali Hassan, her chief close protection officer for 15 years. Ali wasn't just a bodyguard. He had protected her during the darkest days, shielding her from paparazzi, checking cars for explosives, keeping secrets no one else could be trusted with. Their loyalty went beyond professional duty. But could loyalty survive an order this extreme? Camilla explained what needed to happen. Safe number 4 in Archive B contained the original authorizations. It had to disappear without raising alarms. Ali understood instantly that this wasn't simple security work. It was the destruction of evidence, possibly the obstruction of justice. At 1:45 a.m., Ali entered Buckingham Palace through a staff entrance, dressed in standard night security clothing, blending into the shadows. His credentials allowed access to most non-public areas. He carried tools, a flashlight disguised as a laser cutter for the safe, and an incendiary device for the final destruction. He moved through corridors he knew intimately, avoiding patrols and cameras, heading toward the archive room in the palace's oldest, most maze-like wing. He arrived at 2:03 a.m. The door was locked with a keypad, but Ali's clearance opened it. Inside, the room was dark except for dim emergency lighting. Rows of cabinets and secure units stretched into shadows. Safe number 4 stood against the far wall, heavy and reinforced. He activated the laser cutter, slowly and quietly melting the internal mechanism. 15 minutes passed before the lock gave way. The safe door opened. Inside was a red portfolio containing 40 pages of original special fund authorizations, Charles' signatures paired with Camilla's purple seals. Each page documented hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions, of pounds fraudulently extracted. Ali raised the lighter, ready to ignite the papers and erase all evidence. Suddenly, high-intensity floodlights illuminated the room. Ali was blinded, dropping the lighter. Multiple footsteps approached rapidly. Lieutenant Colonel Thompson's voice cut through. "The file stays. Hands on your head." Ali was surrounded by 5 armed Royalty Protection Group officers. The tactical team wasn't bluffing. Could he fight, or was this the end? Outnumbered, outgunned, Ali raised his hands. His pistol was removed, zip-tied behind his back, and the red portfolio carefully retrieved. Thompson informed him he was under arrest for attempted destruction of Crown property, unauthorized access, and conspiracy to obstruct a royal investigation. Ali said nothing, relying on years of training to protect himself and his principal. Thompson dropped a final bombshell. The burner phone Ali used had been monitored by GCHQ for 3 days. Every word Camilla had spoken, every order she gave to destroy the documents, was recorded. She had effectively convicted herself. Ali's capture ended one conspiracy, but it revealed a larger question that eclipsed everything else. Why would a queen risk felony and the loyalty of her most trusted protector just to destroy evidence? Ali's testimony and the post-Charles Fund. Ali Hassan sat in a room that officially didn't exist, a secure interrogation facility used only for situations too sensitive for normal police channels. The space was austere, metal table, 3 chairs, walls that were almost certainly soundproof, and cameras in the corners, but its legal status was ambiguous. Under emergency provisions of the Official Secrets Act and Royal Security Rules, matters threatening the monarchy could be handled through extraordinary procedures, bypassing normal legal protections. No lawyers were present. Across the table sat Prince Willaim and Lord Justice Pemberton, the senior legal advisor. William had insisted on conducting the interrogation personally. He didn't just want to know what Ali had done, he wanted to understand why a decorated protection officer would risk everything to commit a crime for Camilla. That loyalty had a limit, but had Ali crossed it completely? The interrogation opened with a recording, Camilla's voice, crystal clear, ordering Ali to destroy the documents in Archive B, safe number 4. Ali's face remained calm, but William noticed his jaw tightening, his breathing controlled. Camilla hadn't asked him to hide or relocate the papers. She had demanded they cease to exist. She hadn't expressed concern for his safety or a plan for his exit. Her only goal was the disappearance of evidence. William slid documents across the table, outlining the consequences. Ali faced 20 years minimum for trespassing in restricted areas, attempted destruction of national property, endangering a heritage building, conspiracy to obstruct a royal investigation, and possibly terrorism-related charges because he was armed. His family would lose pensions, housing, and educational support. Years of service would be erased in an instant. Another document offered a way out: full cooperation in exchange for witness protection-style benefits, sentence reduction, and security for his family. Ali would provide testimony about the conspiracy, the financial schemes, and, specifically, Camilla's role. He sat in silence, wrestling with loyalty, conscience, and fear. When he finally spoke, he admitted the loyalty he'd thought noble was now criminal. Camilla hadn't asked him to protect someone in danger. She had asked him to commit a felony to cover up systematic theft and exploitation of a dying king. That distinction shifted everything. For 6 hours, Ali's testimony revealed the scope of Camilla's operation. It wasn't opportunistic. It was strategic. She had created the so-called Post-Charles Safety Fund, a plan to secure at least £100 million in independent assets to protect herself after Charles died. She used her children as fronts, funneling royal contracts through shell companies to launder money into trusts under their control. Ali described how Camilla manipulated Charles to authorize these transactions. She obtained his medical schedule under the guise of planning her own appointments, then presented documents during periods when he was most compliant, after chemotherapy, under anti-nausea drugs, when his capacity to scrutinize details was diminished. Documents claiming to support charities or conservation initiatives were actually funding her children's shell companies. Ali confirmed that Camilla never expressed remorse. Her only stress came from the fear of being caught, not concern for the king. She treated the exploitation of Charles's illness as a business strategy, proud of the efficiency and secrecy of the operation. The interrogation left William physically shaken. He had suspected corruption, but hearing the deliberate, long-term exploitation of his father's illness was unbearable. Camilla had weaponized trust, illness, and affection to enrich herself and her children. His father, who had defended and loved her, had been systematically betrayed. Ali's testimony completed the evidence. The conspiracy was exposed in its entirety, from document destruction to financial manipulation. But the most difficult confrontation remained. William had to face his father, to show him that the woman caring for him in his final years was the architect of his exploitation. The documents, the recordings, the timeline of calculated betrayal were all in William's hands. The conspiracy had been unraveled, but the ultimate question lingered. How do you tell a dying king that the love of his life was also the greatest threat to him? And what would that revelation do to the remnants of his world? The king's silent collapse. The morning arrived gray and cold, the sky heavy as if warning of the storm about to break inside the estate. William drove himself to his father's private residence, ignoring protocol. This had to be a father-son conversation between a king and his regent about a betrayal that threatened to destroy everything. He arrived at 9, carrying only a leather briefcase. Inside, the weight of papers and recordings far outweighed their physical mass. Charles was in his private study, a lifetime of service reflected in the photographs and mementos surrounding him. The cancer had aged him dramatically. His skin had a fragile translucence, his frame had thinned, and the quiet dignity he carried now seemed brittle. Camilla sat nearby, a book in her lap, playing the role of devoted wife. When she saw William, she froze. She understood instantly that this wasn't a discussion she could manipulate. William's expression was hard. He was no longer the son who could be guilted into submission. William laid the briefcase on the table and began removing documents in a methodical order. First, the financial audits, charts, and graphs, tracing money from royal accounts through shell companies to Parker Bowles family trusts. Then, the original special fund authorizations, each bearing Charles's signature and Camilla's purple seal. He explained the scale. Over 5 years, £87 million had vanished from royal accounts through ghost invoices and fraudulent contracts. Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes were the ultimate beneficiaries, hiding ownership through layers of corporate structures. William handed Charles one of the forms, a £2.8 million emergency conservation payment that ended up in a Jersey shell company before being laundered into a family trust. Charles' hands trembled as he held the papers, struggling to remember signing them. William continued, pairing each authorization with medical records showing that Charles had signed under heavy sedation or pain management. 43 high-value authorizations, all signed during periods of vulnerability. Someone with access to his medical schedule had exploited the windows when he was most compliant. Could a son even explain betrayal this calculated to a father? Then William pointed out the purple seal, Camilla's personal insignia, applied before the documents reached Charles. This wasn't a staff error. This was active facilitation. Every fraudulent authorization bore her seal. She had knowingly approved each request. Charles stared at it, shaking. The woman he had trusted, the one he had defended against public opinion and even his own family, had used him as a tool to enrich her children. The last piece of evidence was a recording of Ali Hassan, Camilla's longtime bodyguard. He described in chilling detail how she had obtained Charles's medical schedule, timed document signing sessions, and falsified the nature of requests to exploit his trust and charitable instincts. She called her accumulation strategy the Post-Charles Safety Fund, aiming to secure at least £100 million in independent assets. After hearing the recording, Charles could no longer deny what was happening. He realized the scale of the betrayal, the deliberate exploitation of his illness, and the extent to which he had been manipulated. He asked the question that haunted decades of their relationship. Why? He had given her everything: love, trust, protection, and status. He had married her, elevated her, and defended her. And now she had turned his illness into an opportunity, using his vulnerability to steal millions. The tears rolling down his face weren't for anger. They were pure devastation, grief at the realization that his final years had been lived under a lie. Camilla tried to speak, to explain herself, but every defense collapsed against the weight of documents and testimony. Her tears were not of remorse. They were fear. She realized her carefully constructed world was unraveling, and she calculated how to survive. She tried to blame William, claiming his resentment over Diana's memory had driven her to protect herself. But William cut through her excuses. Her fear of losing money had cost her the only thing that truly mattered: Charles's trust. Charles retreated inward, processing the totality of the deception. How many times had she presented documents under the guise of care? How many times had he trusted her, believing she had his well-being in mind, only to be manipulated? Every memory of partnership, love, and protection, it was all a performance, a con built over decades. William turned to his father, softening slightly. He asked whether Charles wanted him to proceed with justice or stop to avoid scandal. Charles shook his head. His tears continued, but there was clarity now. He had tried to protect the family's honor, but Camilla had destroyed it from the inside. He nodded imperceptibly, granting William permission to act. It was the saddest gesture William had ever seen. A father giving his son the authority to destroy the last vestiges of happiness for the sake of survival. The evidence was complete, the conspiracy fully exposed. Yet the ultimate question remained: what does justice look like when the criminal is a queen and the victim is a dying king? William now faced the task of deciding how to hold someone accountable in a system built to protect royalty. Could the monarchy survive the shock of a queen being exposed, and could trust ever be restored within the family? Judgment Day. William stood facing Camilla, knowing this would be the last time they occupied the same room. His voice was steady, carrying the weight of authority and finality. She wasn't being punished out of mercy. She was being removed because the monarchy couldn't survive a public criminal trial against a queen consort. He made that clear immediately. He pulled a legal order from his briefcase, sealed by the Prince Regent and countersigned by the Lord Chief Justice. The terms were absolute. She would leave the estate within 15 minutes and relocate to a remote property in the Scottish Highlands. Her access to public funds would be limited to a small stipend, tightly monitored. She would retain the title of Queen Consort in name only, but would be barred from all public appearances, royal events, or ceremonial duties. Most strikingly, she would have no contact with Charles, no visits, no letters, no calls. Any communication would go through legal channels only. Her children's contact would be limited and supervised, contingent on their full cooperation with financial restitution. William was firm. The children avoided criminal charges only because they complied. Camilla tried to argue, citing her legal rights as queen, But William cut her off. The alternative was stark: full criminal prosecution for fraud, embezzlement, and elder abuse, prison time for her, public trials for her children, and scandal broadcast worldwide. She realized immediately that resistance was pointless. Charles offered no intervention, looking away toward the window, refusing to acknowledge her presence. She whispered acceptance, broken and defeated. 2 officers entered, professional and unflinching, guiding her to the vehicle waiting outside. She could bring only the clothes she wore. All other possessions would be inventoried, and anything not deemed sentimental would be sold for restitution. Each step toward the car was a step out of her life entirely, past the home she had manipulated for years and into obscurity. William watched the Range Rover disappear behind ancient oak trees before turning back to Charles. The king remained seated, staring into the gray morning, processing devastation and relief simultaneously. William gently placed a hand on his father's shoulder, reminding him that he had been betrayed but now protected. Charles nodded slightly, still trembling, asking quietly what would happen next. William assured him the immediate danger was over, the deceit uncovered, the guilty removed, the finances stabilized. But William made it clear the work was only beginning. Public trust had to be rebuilt, internal oversight strengthened, and the monarchy reformed to prevent future abuse. Charles agreed, but cautioned that vigilance must not come at the expense of humanity. The monarchy's value came from connection, warmth, and trust, not rigid control. William acknowledged this balance would be his greatest challenge. Kate entered quietly, standing beside William as a reminder that leadership required support and partnership. She reassured Charles that he would be cared for, surrounded by people who valued him personally, rather than for his crown. Charles, still emotionally raw, recognized that this family was finally acting in his genuine interest, rather than the interest of appearances. He expressed gratitude for William's courage and wisdom, acknowledging that forcing him to confront the truth was a cruel but necessary act. The discussion turned to the children. Tom and Laura would repay much of what was stolen and fade from public life, avoiding prosecution only if they continued cooperation. Any attempt to rehabilitate their public image could trigger legal consequences. The family, once a network of manipulation and secrecy, was now under strict accountability. Eventually, Charles's exhaustion grew evident. William and Kate prepared to leave, pausing to remind him of their commitment and love. William emphasized that the exile, harsh as it seemed, was the only way to protect both the man and the institution. Charles, though grieving, recognized the truth in that and managed a small, sad smile. As they walked to the car, William looked back at the estate, the window where Charles sat. He felt relief that the corruption had been cut out, sorrow for the pain endured, and a sense of the monumental task ahead. Kate squeezed his hand, silently sharing the weight of responsibility. The estate disappeared behind them, the past left behind, but the questions remained. Could the monarchy survive such a profound betrayal from within? Could trust be restored, not just publicly, but inside the family and institution that had been shaken to its core? William didn't answer immediately. He simply stared ahead, knowing the real test was only just beginning. Can the monarchy ever fully recover from a betrayal at the top? And when William becomes king, will Camilla remain isolated in exile? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.